Hey guys, what is up? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. We are officially wrapping up our draft day coverage, or draft weekend coverage, I should say, as the Chargers have finalized their draft class as of about 15 minutes ago. So, as always, my name is Steven. I am your host, and joining me here in the Blue Wire studios are my guys Tyler and sorry about that. So like I was saying, my guys here, Tyler and Arjun. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing today?
I'm doing very well. We'll talk about the class and the fullback they just took with their last pick. So I definitely have thoughts about that, but I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much to the guys in the booth. We're probably like their 80th most popular show, but they showed up for us. They're doing their job. I really appreciate that. And thank you, of course, to my aunt and uncle for hosting us this entire weekend. They let us stay at their place for free.
Yeah.
They gave us hundreds of dollars of food just in their house. It was amazing. They bought a rice cooker for me. I appreciate that so much, guys. Thank you so much.
That's awesome, man. Shout out to them. Shout out to the Munson family. Arjun is here as well. Arjun, how you doing, man?
Doing a little bit worse than when we recorded yesterday, just based on who the Chargers selected. We're going to talk about it. But overall, the experience was great. Obviously, day one was amazing. Got to see the draft in person. Day 2 and 3, we got to go to the bar, see a lot of Chargers fans there, and I mean overall the experience is great. And again, thanks to Tyler's family for hosting us.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a puzzling day today for the Chargers, but we'll dive into it. So we'll just run down the list here. Of course, the Chargers started their class, like Arjun said, with Zion Johnson, the guard from Boston College. Yesterday, they took JT Woods, the safety from Baylor, who we talked a little bit about on our spaces on Twitter this afternoon or this morning. Then they started today with Isaiah Spiller, the running back from Texas A&M, Otito Ogmonia, the defensive tackle from UCLA, Jamari Salyer, the offensive lineman from Georgia, Jasir Taylor, the corner from Wake Forest, Dean Leonard, the corner from Ole Miss, and then the fullback that Tyler mentioned, Xander Horvath from Purdue. So we're going to dive into a little bit from each of these players. Obviously we don't have a ton of notes on a fullback from Purdue, but we'll do our best. So, we'll start kind of just general standouts, and then, like I said, we'll kind of give some analysis on how these players fit in, what this might mean for the rest of the draft class and the roster, and like I said, some general thoughts. So that being said, Arjun, we'll start with you, man. Your general thoughts about this class that the Chargers have put together this weekend.
So overall, I was happy with the first 2 picks. I think the JT Woods one, obviously I think Woods could have gone around later, but we watched a little bit of tape on him, and I think there's a lot of interesting traits that he has that can be coached, and he could be a very solid contributor year one. Overall, though, day 3, I think it was just a mixed bag. My biggest theme going into the draft was how far the Chargers were going to stray from the consensus board, and I think they did a pretty good job of drafting within the lines in the first 6 picks. Then when we got to the final 3 picks, I mean, 2 of those guys weren't even on the Athletics consensus big board out of 300 players. So the fact that they didn't even make it that far, or they overdrafted in that sense, those guys aren't really going to be contributors on defense or on offense. But the fact that they kind of strayed from the big board that late, I mean, I feel like there were some other guys they could have taken at that point.
Yeah, this draft is a bit of a mixed bag for me. The players themselves that they selected that I know anything about, I definitely like these players, and I'm certainly very happy with Jamari Salyer in the 6th round. We'll talk about that fit in a bit. But I'm surprised at the positions that they went with. Now, I mean, did they need a guard? Sure. Did they need a depth corner? Did they need another safety? Sure. But the positions that they went with, running back, guard, fullback, all these positions, they're not premium positions. To me, it's after quarterback, it's edge, it's tackle, it's corner, and wide receiver. And they basically neglected corner most of the way. There's no starter in here, not year 1 at least, which is fine. But I don't even think this is a year 2 starter. These are all special teams guys. No edge rushers were taken. They don't, I think, have a tackle. Depends what Salyer ends up doing. So I'm just a bit surprised they didn't go with any of those premium positions. And they needed an edge 3, potentially an edge 4. Emeka Egbule can get off the team for dating my sister. They needed an edge 4. They needed something else. Instead, I'm seeing, special teams, nose tackle, guard. And again, like these players that I know about, I'm just surprised at the direction that they went. So hopefully there's something after the draft. Hopefully they know maybe it's a priority free agent. Maybe it's an NFL free agent. Hopefully there's some sort of plan post-draft. And Telesco has signed these guys before, but I'm a little worried about some positions right now because it seems Arjun, we were talking on the way here, Arjun pointed out that there's always something that Telesco seems to miss. There's always a position that everyone knows they need to address at some point, and they just don't. 2020, it was tackle. This year, it feels like edge. And with two guys who are not always the healthiest, Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, whether it be injuries or concussions, it's a bit worrisome.
Yeah, so really quickly, the Chargers have signed their first undrafted free agent.
Breaking news.
Breaking news here on the podcast. Former Illinois quarterback Brandon Peters signing with the Chargers to
We got a quarterback?
A quarterback.
Can he play edge rusher?
He cannot rush the passer, but he can be a passer. So, that's then obviously an Easton Stick competition body. So, yeah, I'm going to start off with JT Woods, who we mentioned a little bit, like I said, in our Twitter spaces. The more that I learned about this player, I think I really am a big fan of the selection. And so I think just the issues, first and foremost, that people kind of talked about, the tackling issues, really I'm not super concerned about them. We watched every single missed tackle that he had this past season, and it was just minor technique issues like Brandon Staley was talking about, just a failure to wrap up properly and kind of drive and finish that tackle. But I think you really see a high-end processor and somebody that uses that elite speed to have, as Brandon Staley put it, premier range at the safety position. So I'm a little worried about the cornerback depth. Was worried about the cornerback depth, but I think with JT Woods, that's your sixth defensive back. He has some slot flexibility. He can play against bigger tight ends. So I'm a big fan of that pick, and I'm a big fan of the Jamari Salyer pick, like we mentioned. So we were kind of joking on Twitter, we're 2 years away from, Forrest Lamp and Ryan Groy and Dan Feeney and Cole Toner being starting level players for this team. And, we'll see what they do with Matt Filer. I think he's obviously the likely candidate to bump out to the right tackle, barring a veteran signing. But you have now Matt Filer, Corey Linsley, Zion Johnson as your starting trio potentially. Then you have Brendan Hymas, Will Clapp, and Jamari Salyer, like I mentioned, as your three main backups. So that's a really, really good group. I feel very good about the future of that interior. They really only keep 5 players on a roster, so maybe that's another thing kind of indicating to Matt Filer kicking outside. But Jamari Salyer, Zion Johnson, 2 road grading offensive guards that you can pair with Corey Linsley and just really beef up that interior. So I had a 3rd-round grade on him. He was my 5th ranked interior offensive lineman, and I was shocked that he was available in the 6th round. Tyler kept on asking, like, oh, where'd Salyer go? Where'd Salyer go? And it was like, well, yeah, to the Chargers. So I'm a big fan of that pick. I think that, to me, unequivocally best pick of the day for the Chargers today.
Yeah, arguably the best pick of the draft. I think that player can. So there was some sort of medical concern potentially, and that's potentially the reason why he fell. I don't know what that is yet because he's a very good player, highly regarded on the consensus board by Brandon Thorne, the O-line guru, by us. Not that anybody cares. So I'm a little bit surprised that he fell. But going back to JT Woods, I'm not saying he's like Andrew Booth and Derek Stingley and their tackling problem because they do have high missed tackle rates. But he's kind of that same sort of thing where he clicks, he closes, he reads, reacts, he triggers downhill. He has excellent range. Like, watching the mistakes almost made me appreciate the pick more because I knew that he had a bad missed tackle rate. And I've seen it, but I didn't watch every missed tackle, obviously. So seeing him make those mistakes, they were so correctable in my opinion. And some of that is just him bulking up. It's very correctable. So the more I thought about it, if you sit there and look at the things that are good about him and things that are bad about him, if you focus on the bad stuff, and listen, he did fall to the 3rd round for a reason. He was projected to go to the 4th round for a reason. If you focus on that, maybe you don't like it as much. But if you think about the way he's going to fit in this defense and what he can do with Derwin James, we saw Brandon Staley say, hey, we're going to arm Derwin James with as many guys as we can. And if this guy can be, obviously a turnover machine and a guy that can free up Derwin James, it's perfect. And there's so much to develop there. Nasir Adderley took 3 years just to become a downhill tackler as a cover 2 sort of guy. JT Woods can do that. Now, again, there's a tackling issue that needs to be worked on, but the mentality, the intelligence, all of that is there. I really like this pick. It's a B- for me because it is a reach, but it has gone up for me because I really appreciate even just the mistakes.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the other picks here. I think obviously we have to start with Isaiah Spiller. That's who the Chargers started their day with. We knew that the Chargers needed to address the backup running spot. They needed a true complement to Austin Eckler to kind of take some pressure off of him. Eckler at one point in the season was basically begging the rest of the guys to step up. And I think to a point, Justin Jackson did do that at the end of last season, but obviously he's not on the team. Michael Davis took his number. So it's a little bit of a weird situation going on there. But Isaiah Spiller out of Texas A&M. I know a lot of people were, accusing me of being a Debbie Downer on the pick today and really frustrated with how negative I was being. And let me just say, I do really like the back. I think his value as it pertains to the consensus big board was a good pick. He's not my kind of back. I like those shorter, more elusive, faster kind of running backs, and that's what I thought the Chargers needed based off of Justin Jackson kind of being that second back to Austin Eckler. And I wanted them to essentially take that guy, get a healthier version, a cheaper version, if you will, and kind of roll out there. But instead, you get a taller, little slower running back who, he forced a lot of missed tackles, which is good. He has a legitimate reputation for being a receiving back, but I'm just a little confused by the fit, and I don't like the approach more than anything else because you could have gotten a very similar player later on in the draft, and you start day 3 with clear needs at edge. You need a cornerback 4 that we were talking about, and instead you start the day with a running back. So Isaiah Spiller's a good player. He is. I just don't like the process of the pick. I don't like the value of the pick. And that really is my criticism of taking Isaiah Spiller in the 4th round.
Yeah, no, the biggest problem with me, honestly, is okay, so Isaiah Spiller coming out of Texas A&M is a better running back than Larry Roundtree and Joshua Kelly were coming out of Missouri and UCLA, respectively.
Mm-hmm.
Dane Brugler had Spiller as RB3, had him, and the consensus big board from The Athletic had him ranked at the 66 mark, I think. And so the Chargers getting him at the 120-ish area is great. You're getting a great value on him. The problem is evaluating running backs from college to the NFL, one is pretty tricky. One of the few predictors that has shown to be stable from college to the NFL, does a good job of predicting running back success from college to the NFL, is the running back's explosive run rate in college. Isaiah Spiller's explosive run rate in college was 5.8%. Larry Roundtree's explosive run rate in college was around 5.8%. I don't know the exact number, but it's around 5.8%. Joshua Kelly's explosive run rate in college was around 5.6%. So you have 3 non-explosive runners paired with Austin Eckler.
Yeah.
You have 3 of the same guys. He's a great he's a good running back. RB3 from Dane Brugler, 66 on the consensus board. It just doesn't make sense from a fit perspective. I don't really see how he adds a ton of value in this running back room if it just seems like they're doubling down on what they already had and they're just trying to get it seems like they're compensating for the Larry Roundtree pick. I'm not a huge fan of doing that. I would have rather seen someone who has a little more juice, or if they were to take this type of player, you could wait until round 6 like they did with Roundtree with other bigger needs on the roster. So wasn't too big of a fan of Spiller, even though I think in terms of the value on him as a player, I think they got him, later than when he was projected to go.
Yeah, it's kind of like JT Woods for me where, okay, good player, absolutely. And this was actually around late, it feels like. You got a steal with this guy. Again, I know Arjun knows and has shown in his data, there's really rarely a steal in the draft, but it does kind of feel like the Chargers got one here. I believe he was my RB6. I don't know where he was for you, Steven, but he was.
He was much lower for me.
Okay. I like the pick more, but he was, he was a steal based on what where we had him at least. I had a 3rd round grade on him.
Sure.
And so, I think the Chargers just wanted a guy who ran in a system at Texas A&M that they were used to, that they were going to run, that they tried to lean on. I know you had watched a lot more of the rushing attack in the second half of the season for the Chargers, and they leaned into more, maybe some misdirection, some counters, a lot of pullers, a lot of slice, all that sort of stuff. And I think just watching, I had to revisit it. There's a lot of players in my brain right now. So I had to revisit Isaiah Spiller, and you could just tell that the system that they ran was exactly what Spiller is used to. And so the Chargers, it's a kind of a nice fit. So, on top of that, I do think him being number 1 in drop rate in a good way and number 2 out of all of our running backs in fumbles is great. He is a ball security guy. And I think we're just kind of sick of watching, Joshua Kelly fumble the ball and give the game away, pick a game, any game. And then Larry Roundtree isn't much of a receiver. I believe, I believe right now, Isaiah Spiller has more receiving yards than Larry Roundtree does, because Larry Roundtree has -1 yards in the NFL. So, he's perceived to be a good receiving back. I think he's one of the best pass catchers. Maybe not as much as like a James Cook sort of guy, but out of the backfield work sort of guy. So I think he holds onto the ball better than than Joshua Kelly does. He's a better receiver than Larry Roundtree is. But yeah, like you said, there's a lot of redundancy there. It's not great, but hey, they got a steal. He fits what they want to do. He's an improvement in certain areas over other guys that they have. And I think we have an RB2 set here.
Yeah, no, if Isaiah Spiller is not the RB2 this year, then we have some serious problems in evaluation. So I think unequivocally, like I said, he is an upgrade over what the Chargers have had the past 2 years after they let Melvin Gordon go. Danny Kelly of The Ringer actually compared Isaiah Spiller to Melvin Gordon. So potentially very similar styles. I think if there is a day 3 pick that obviously kind of outproduces his draft slot, it's going to be Spiller, just because he is basically a starter. So, every single draft analyst will tell you that if you're trying to get a really good draft, you're trying to get 3-4 starters, and Spiller's going to be a starter, right? Essentially, carrying the workload as a running back too. He is going to be a starting caliber player. So, Tyler's making some great points. I think one of my favorite things about him, kind of just turning it a little bit positive, he's a fantastic Texas route runner. Like he is that good of a pass catching running back, where I feel like he can complement and kind of take, again, kind of some of that pressure off of Austin Eckler. It's just the value of that selection when you had other players on the board just was not my favorite, which is, again, is fine. But, I'll kind of have to see. And I think, one of the things that we were saying yesterday, the rushing attack is going to be improved purely by having Zion Johnson and now Jamari Salyer, of course, who I know he kind of graded out as a better pass protector, and we'll see where exactly he fits in. But you improve the offensive line, the rushing attack is going to improve. So let's talk a little bit about where we feel about the defensive line at this point. Obviously, the UCLA defensive tackle, Otito Ogbonia, coming in as a potential nose tackle, one technique kind of profile. He really stood out at the Senior Bowl to me as somebody that was winning a lot of one-on-one reps. Actually, Gavino Borquez from Chargers Wire is very high on him and posted some clips of him actually beating Zion in pass protection drills. So, Tyler, where do you feel now about this defensive line depth after adding Sebastian Joseph Day, Austin Johnson, and now Ogbonia in the draft?
In terms of depth, I feel really good about this group. It's a very deep class. I had someone text me from the team that it's a very deep, like the trenches are so deep for this team outside of maybe right tackle, but we'll kind of see what they do there. It's a very good group. And you pointed out, Stephen doing the film study, that the Chargers kind of made the switch. Like, yeah, on paper, they're a 3-4, but they made the switch to having maybe, 4 big dudes up front who could do a lot of things. I don't know. I've not watched Otito Ogbonia, so I don't know if he's versatile. But if they can move, him all over, they have Fehoko all over, that's a really, really solid group. I don't know. I wish there was another pass rushing guy.
Sure.
Jerry Tillery is your best pass rusher, and that's not great. A lot of people were hoping that they'd take Devontae Wyatt, and the Tillery would be your your backup rotational, pass rusher. It's just Jerry Tillery. Like, Braden Fehoko is great. He's a nose guy. Otito, he is the, unfortunately, lowest ranked guy on our composite stat rankings. So it's a bit surprising that they didn't go for more of a pass rush type, but it's hard to argue that at least there's good depth on this team.
Yeah, and you pointed out on Twitter the RAS profile of Ogbonia is very similar to the profile of A'Shawn Robinson, who's carved out a very nice role in the NFL, specifically with the Rams. So I think, speaking on kind of what I watched from the Rams this past season when I was watching Sebastian Joseph Day, one of the things that they really started to do was essentially get a jumbo package line to stop the run. And so they had a very versatile group, of course, with A'Shawn Robinson and Sebastian Joseph Day, who could play a bunch of the different positions. And then Greg Gaines was their stereotypical one technique, nose tackle, run stuffing defensive player. And so what they would do is they would bring all 3 of those guys in. They would have Aaron Donald as kind of their 4 tech, 5 tech, and they would also have the 2 edge rushers. And so we saw the Chargers do a little bit of that. They'd kick Joey Bosa inside and then bring in Uchenna Nwosu and put maybe Kenneth Murray on the edge or something like that. Now they can get legitimate space eaters in that kind of package and really control the line of scrimmage with Ogbonia. Maybe it's Christian Covington alongside those three, or maybe it's Braden Fajoko. And I think, frankly, my favorite thing about the pick is that they actually have a legitimate rotation along the defensive line, where last year they were just playing Justin Jones and Jerry Tillery like 80% of the snaps whenever they were healthy. Linval Joseph at age 33 playing, 75, 80% of the snaps. That's just not how you have a healthy rotation and keep guys fresh. And now they kind of pointing at carrying 6 defensive linemen on the roster, which I felt like they should have done all along last year. And like I said, be able to rotate guys, keep them fresh, and have 5 really good run-stuffing defensive tackles.
Yeah, and so we watched Otito's run, like all 11 of his run stops in 2021. And I mean, the thing I noticed, and I think you noticed also, Steven, is like a lot of them came lining up at 1 tech. Wasn't a ton of like 3 tech alignments when he had a good run stop. So he's probably going to be the backup to Sebastian Joseph Day, but I could also see, like you said, a rotation where he's playing 1 tech or he's playing 3 tech. I also think one of the biggest issues for the Chargers that no one really has talked about is like their red zone defense. So last year, the Chargers allowed a touchdown on 64.2% of the opponent's red zone trips. So the Chargers also allowed the 4th most red zone trips on defense. So out of the 67 red zone trips they allowed a touchdown on 43 of them. Part of that is because they couldn't stop the run.
Sure.
Now, I know we talked about it a little, about how like the Rams have these big jumbo packages of 4 D tackles, nose tackles. I wonder if this is a pick to help the red zone defense, which traditionally isn't something that's stable from year to year. Like you could be really good in the red zone one year and really bad the next year, like vice versa. But I do think this is a step towards stopping the run, and anything that gets Tillery off the field on early downs is a net positive. So I think it does help the versatility. I didn't have any film or thoughts on him when they took him. Obviously, it was a position of need. They needed another interior D lineman, and I think he does help them in areas where they need to improve, and especially in the low red where they had a ton of struggles last year stopping the run and stopping the pass.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just picturing in my head that final play the Raiders ran where Josh Jacobs got that first down,
Sure.
and him kicking the field goal. Your first 2 picks in this draft, one of them is a defensive lineman who can help in that regard, of course, but you also have JT Woods who can trigger downhill and stop Josh Jacobs and make the postseason. Like, I think these 2 picks really do address that kind of problem. Like you said, maybe it's red zone defense, sure, but just got to have it situations. We have to be faster or more physical. And again, whether you like the players or not, it seems like that was their intention with at least these first 2 picks.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call, Arjun and Tyler, and being able to focus in on stopping the run. And so I think the run defense, everybody was really worried about to start the draft process. And, now I feel like it's taken care of. We'll see about the linebackers. It's another position they didn't necessarily draft, but we'll see how that one pans out. So, every single year it's really funny. Like we grade all these players, and this year I almost got up to like 175. And I only had the 2 players that the Chargers drafted not graded, not watching film or anything. And it was the 2 cornerbacks that they took, which is a position of need for them. So we'll kind of wait as it pertains to, really analyzing and diving into Jasir Taylor from Wake Forest and what's his name? Excuse me?
Dean Leonard.
Dean Leonard, thank you, from Ole Miss. So interesting prospects. They're at least really good athletes. That much we know right now. But where are we at with this cornerback room? Because right now, Tavon Campbell is your 4th cornerback. That was the case heading into last season. So, Arjun, what is happening here?
Yeah, no, it's like you said, we're 1 injury away from Tavon Campbell starting, or if Asante gets hurt, we're 1 injury away from like maybe Keemon Hall being the designated slot corner, and that's upsetting. Like that's just like look on the outside. If you're not a fan of the Chargers, or you're just like a national analyst, and you're just like, okay, what do you think about the Chargers? That's such a good team. Their starting 22 is among the best in the league, and I agree. But once that 1 injury hits, you're starting a CFL player, you're starting a UDFA. Like it's good that they invested a 6th and 7th round pick, but like these guys had bad production in college. They're just athletes. I'm just guessing these are special teams guys. So again, one injury away from like experiencing the same thing that happened last year against the Chiefs, against the Texans, where you have Trey Marshall starting or you have Devontae Harris starting. Like I hope they have a plan to get some cheap guys in free agency, because right now I am a little bit worried about the depth on defense, because I think that is a huge issue still.
Yeah, I mean, I had them taking 2 corners in our final mock. I had them taking one in the 3rd round, I think one later in the 6th round, because you need them. And like outside corners who played and at good programs, and I know who they. I'm not saying these guys are bad. I don't know who they are, but I know that at least the guys that I was going for could either start or develop into it. And I don't know about these guys, because we know with the Telesco history, it's just kind of like they're fast or they're not fast, but they're really high character and they're going to be great on special teams. But we need to find guys to develop, to get better, and to eventually, either replace Michael Davis or play if he is hurt or whatever. And, there's kind of like Davis is injury prone-ish. Also, like Samuel Jr. is on his 2nd concussion. And they figured, nah, we don't need corners till later. I mean, basically, it feels like the same thing as edge rusher. They do have 3 corners. They only have 2 real edge rushers. So, hey, they have 3 corners. That's 1 more. But you're going to need more than that. To me, it really, we're 1 injury away from, Campbell starting for potentially, or Keemon Hall starting potentially. I really think we're 1 injury away from, because Telesco has done this before. If you have a history with the team, and we'll bring you back. They brought Jaleel Addae back, so you probably know where I'm going with this. We're 1 injury away from Chris Harris Jr. returning to the team. I'm completely honest. I think, and I suppose you could do worse, but I think we're 1 injury away from them going, listen, we need someone who can step in right away and is understands our scheme. I'm going to give Chris Harris Jr. a call.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just a little puzzled by the fits of both of these players. I mean, there were other players on the board that could develop into starting caliber corners that they could have taken. Whether that was a Chase Lucas from Arizona State, whether that was a Jalen Watson from Washington State, or Tariq Castro-Fields from Penn State. Lots of state schools. But I think they really needed kind of that outside profile developmental project. And everything that I'm reading about these 2 corners is that they're going to be slot corners. One of the Dean Leonard tweets that I saw was maybe potentially him converting to safety. And so there's really Michael Davis and J.C. Jackson, and then you don't really have another true outside corner, because Tavon Campbell played a ton in the slot across the last 2 seasons as well. So I'm just a little confused by that. Maybe somebody cheap is incoming, maybe a Kyle Fuller, Chris Harris coming back. I don't know, man. It's just a little weird. And then the edge rusher group, I have to imagine that they have kind of a veteran agreement. Imagine is probably the wrong word. Have to hope that they have a veteran agreement in hand, because, in a best case scenario with Chris Rumpf, he's your edge 3, but then you literally do not have an edge 4 on your roster. There's a CFL guy, there's Emeka Egbole. I don't know, man. It's tough. So I think the Chargers will have some of these players hit. They generally always feel like I get at least 1 or 2 day 3 picks to be starting caliber players in each draft. But if that's only Isaiah Spiller and Jamari Salyer, I think that's a little disappointing. So I don't want it to seem like we're really harping in on these bad picks, but I just think the process that the Chargers have kind of taken across these 3 days just leaves a little bit left to be desired. That said, I really like Zion Johnson. Obviously, I champion for him. Zion Johnson is a fantastic pick. I think you can see a world where JT Woods becomes a future starter for them. And listen, like Nasir Adderley's a free agent next year. Derwin James also a free agent next year. They can't afford to sign both. They have like $8 million in cap space next year. So JT Woods is going to be a starting player for them. Isaiah Spiller going to be a starting player for them. We'll see about Jamari Salyer. If that's your 4 starting players, then from an outside perspective, you're probably fine. It's just the process of not taking an edge, not taking a corner, and favoring these other positions. Again, I like these players, but I just feel like they left some meat on the bone, specifically at those premium positions, like you guys said earlier.
Yeah, I mean, them getting starters out of Salyer or Spiller, potentially, I guess Salyer or Spiller will never start. Well, Eckler is on the team, of course, but they only got them because they fell, and one potentially fell because of medical concerns. They have to make a pick in the draft, and I like Ogbonia. I seem to like Ogbonia, but Jasir Taylor, this is the first corner that you take. He's a corner?
Yeah,
he's a corner. So he's a corner, and look, I have not watched the film. He might be outstanding outside of this, but he had 9 penalties and 5 touchdowns allowed in 2021. I think you said like 120 passer rating allowed when targeted, but he runs a 4.37. So it's just, I'm just surprised. They pride themselves on being some sort of DBU. Salyer says they're always going to be looking for corners.
Yeah.
And they looked for corners and they found corners. They just found one. The first one they took had 9 penalties and 5 touchdowns.
Yeah,
And a
that's
passer rating of 120 in 2021.
That's like biggest surprise of this weekend, right? Like Brandon Staley gets on the podium at the combine. I need corners. I need more corners. I am always going to be looking for corners. We heard through Daniel Popper that they potentially were not super high on Michael Davis. I heard that they were potentially looking at Kyler Gordon at 17, the corner from Washington. And you don't take a corner until the 6th round, and it's a guy who's probably not even playing like anything beyond special teams. So again, just have some more questions than answers than I would like. And if they get the 4 starters like we mentioned, obviously the draft class will be better than they have in previous years. But I'm just like, where are we at with corner? Where are we at with edge? Those are not really questions that you want to still have after the 3rd day of the draft.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think more than anything, the first 5 picks of this draft came at non-premium positions. We're talking guard, safety, running back, D tackle, and then guard again because Salyer's not going to play tackle for the Chargers. So that kind of process isn't great, right? Like you look at the Chiefs, their first 4 picks came at positions that impact the passing game. That's what the Chargers did last year, and they improved on offense. But this year, like they're still going to be a top 5 offense as long as Herbert and the key guys stay healthy. But the process, like Steven's talking about, isn't great. Now, the one thing I will say, I think they did a decent job at, and I brought it up before, is like staying close to the consensus board. So one of my guys, Benjamin Robinson, who has a website called Grinding the Mocks, which pretty much takes into account like where a player is expected to go based on where they land in various mock drafts. The Chargers ranked 10th in terms of getting players at a value compared to where they're expected to go in the draft, which is good. So that they're one of there's only like 13 teams that ended up getting value out of like their entire draft. The Chargers are one of them, so that's good to see. They didn't reach too much on players, and this metric is adjusted by pick. So, the later rounds where you have Jasir Taylor and Dean Leonard, even though they might not be on the consensus big board, it doesn't really matter because this is adjusted by round. So the Chargers, I think, did a good job of sticking true to like not reaching too much on a player. I know the JT Woods pick was a little bit of a reach, but a round isn't like as much as like Cole Strange or anyone the Patriots took or the Giants took after round 1. So process over results as always. I am just curious to see what they do after the draft because I think there are a lot of needs that still need to be filled.
Yeah, so there's been a bunch of undrafted free agent signings so far. Only the one for the Chargers, Illinois quarterback that I mentioned earlier. So we'll have to see what they do, man. I would love to see them. Mario Goodrich still remains unsigned. He has not signed with anybody. All of the offensive tackles are gone. So we'll see, man. They still have that hole at right tackle. They still have that hole at edge. But I'm very excited about the interior groups of this offensive and defensive lineman. I think this group that the Chargers put together on both sides of those group are really fantastic. So, like I said, we'll have some more thoughts on Jasir Taylor and Dean Leonard, as well as the fullback, as we are able to kind of dive in a little bit more to their film. But Tyler, final thoughts of this draft weekend before we head out of here.
Overall, I had a blast. This was a lot of fun being here. Again, staying for free with my aunt and uncle was fantastic. Anywhere I could stay for free and get free food is all right with me. If you had told me 2.5 years ago when we had started the podcast that I would give the biggest happy reaction to 2 interior offensive linemen, 2 big. I am no interior offensive lineman by any means. I would have been surprised, but hey, I love it. I love those 2 picks. I can't wait to dive into these players more and see why. Because even JT Woods, if I gave the C+ to, the more you dove into it, the more you understood it. So I can't wait to at least, good or bad, understand why these players were selected by the Chargers.
Arjun, final thoughts, man.
Really enjoyed the experience as always. I think the Chargers results could have had a lot left to be desired. But overall, Zion, as long as Zion hits and JT contributes year 1, I think it'll be fine. Anything after that is kind of just a bonus. Really excited for the future of the team. And, again, really appreciate you guys letting me join you guys on this really cool adventure.
Yeah, man, this weekend was a lot more fun being able to be together. Obviously, we wish Alex were able to make this trip. Maybe one day we'll be able to, go the 6 of us now. Essentially, Kyle, I feel like is a guilty as charged adjacent. So we'll kind of see what we do there. But really excited about this group of interior players, like I mentioned, being able to be here with you two and taking all the draft stuff was a lot of fun. So that's going to do it for us today, guys. We will have, like I said, more reaction and grades as we dive further into this class. But we will talk to you next time, recording probably on Tuesday or Wednesday. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. And as always, leave us a rating or review. Check us out on YouTube, all that good stuff. Bye.